Imagine with me for a moment this morning that your company is throwing a party. They've organized the entire organization to show up. All the C suite ranking executives join in with managers and supervisors and the general staff to celebrate the great wealth that this company has gathered. Now, think about this. Wouldn't this be cool? The rendezvous lasted 180 days. Who would love that at work? If this were not incredible enough, the party was extended by memo with a great feast that would last another 7 days, in which individuals were invited to take part in this great celebration. Nothing is spared. Incredible decor, unlimited food and drink is at your disposal. You have comfortable furnishings all around you. The colors pop. The display of immense riches is all around you. Let me mention really quickly, this particular party was for males only. Now, ladies, before you get too upset, the owner's wife has set up a party of her own. It's in the palatial square footage of the family's impressive estate. You're having a great time with friends. You're lost in conversation, having the time of your life with a group of people that you just understand well. Imagine being the female host of the party, and the butler comes to you and says you've been asked to join the other party immediately. Your presence has been requested by your husband. He wanted you to come so that the individuals could see you as his most prized gift. Yet you're not about to leave the party that you are hosting at the wonderful mansion you have grown to love, a place greater than anyone has in the entire county, the state, or the region. You have a moment to be proud of, and you're not going to miss that moment, so you deny the invitation to leave, and you stay put in your own celebration. Without communication, it is brought to your attention that in your husband's anger, he has demoted you and written you off as his wife, telling his closest staff members and executive team that your behavior sets a precedence that other employees and family members might follow. It must be dealt with, and if not, it would be viewed negatively. Your refusal to grant this request has locked you out of the house. You're no longer listed with the higher-ups, and you've lost your position. Now, I want to take that parable and I want to put it into a biblical reality. Queen Vashti, the wife of King Xerxes, has been demoted. She is no longer recognized in the royal family, and after the queen is removed from her position of prominence, we don't hear much about her in Scripture. Yet the queen's exit opens this gap in the kingdom, and this gap falls upon a woman by the name of Esther. I want to speed up our story. I think I'll put it this way. She has been the winner of a year-long beauty pageant in which she caught the eye of the king. Favor was granted to her, and a crown was placed upon her head. There's much to the biblical account. We'll get into some of it today. I can't share all the details. But Esther is the character that we pick up on in the second week of our series. The struggle is real. Can you turn to somebody and just say, the struggle is real this morning? I want to catch you up. It won't take me long. Last week, we started the series and we learned 3 things about a struggle. Number one, we learned that struggle creates pressure. We learn that struggle sometimes intensifies pain. And then we learn that struggle ultimately produces promise. As we look at one of the scriptures that Jesus talked about this woman giving birth and the anguish and everything that she would go through. But she would forget about what she experienced because there was a promise on the other side. And I don't know about you, but we did this message last week, the struggle is real, and I found myself again this week wanting to live in continual comfort. Who in this room just wants to be comfortable most of the time? I think what I'm learning in my life is we can't learn to pray every struggle away, because every struggle is not there to stop you. Some struggles are there to shape you. And we want to look at that as we look at the life of Queen Esther, who is newly appointed to this position. And we see that in the life of Esther that the struggle can be very risky at times. This story is real. This story has drama. Mordecai is the uncle that raised Esther. And Mordecai overhears this group of guys talking, and they were plotting to kill King Xerxes. And Mordecai is going to pass the information on to this newly appointed queen, who is his niece. The men who plotted to kill him, it didn't amount to anything. They were taken care of. But sometime after this, there was a man by the name of Haman who was promoted to prime minister. It made him really the second in command of the entire kingdom next to the king. I want to take you to Esther chapter 3. We're going to read several verses from the Bible today. Esther chapter 3, verse 1. Sometime later, King Xerxes promoted Haman, son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, over all the other nobles, making him the most powerful official in the empire. All the king's officials would bow down before Haman to show him respect wherever he passed by, for so the king had commanded. But Mordecai refused to bow down or show him respect. This continues to happen as you read the biblical story. Mordecai, as Haman would pass before him, would not bow down. He would not comply with the protocol in that kingdom. And Haman decides from his position of prominence that something's going to have to be done. And he thinks about it. I'm not just going to punish Mordecai, but he felt that all the Jewish people needed to be dealt with. So he drafts up this plan. And this group of people, he said, that would not comply and do things his way. They were living in these provinces and jurisdictions. And he goes and he talks to the king about this, and the king will take off his signet ring. He will put it into the hand of Haman so that he can go off and that he can sign this decree that would wipe out this group of the Jewish individuals. Esther 3:15 says, at the king's command, the decree went out by swift messengers, and it was also proclaimed in the fortress of Susa. Then the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa fell into confusion. Well, if you were a Jew at that time, who believes you might be a little bit confused as well? The struggle is real. I want to talk a little bit about the struggle with position. There are times that all of us sitting in this room, for those that are watching online, the same with you, that we look at another person that has a certain position, a position of prominence, a position higher than yours, and we think this way sometimes. What would life be like if I were not living out the mundane, the same old thing every day? What if I had their position? I wonder if I had a chance at their position, what type of difference that I could make if I only had their position. Sometimes we look from the outside in and we look at this individual and we think, man, if I just had their position, it would be easy. Life would be cake. Who's ever looked at somebody else's position and said, I could do it? We might not admit that today. You might even think I might be able to do it a little bit better. But I want to remind all of us that have been in any position and we have found ourselves doing this and now we're doing that. I want to remind you that if you found success in any position in your life, be that at a company, be that as a parent, be that in so many different ways that we could say today, who has often found that that new position brought a whole lot of struggle on? And the struggle is real. Esther has won, again, this 12-month beauty pageant, and she's crowned. I want to go to Esther chapter 2, verse 17, the struggle with position. And the king loved Esther more than any one of the other young women. He was so delighted with her that he set the royal crown on her head and declared her queen instead of Vashti. To celebrate the occasion, he gave a great banquet in Esther's honor for all the nobles and officials, declaring a public holiday for the provinces and giving generous gifts to everyone. Even after all the young women young women who had been transferred to the second harem, and Mordecai had become a palace official. Esther continued to keep her family background and nationality a secret. She was still following Mordecai's directions, this is her uncle, just as she did when she lived in his home. And everyone who has been promoted to a new position knows this, right? There's no struggle at all. It's easy. You know everything about it. You always know what to do. Everyone who's been or experienced an upgrade in position, you know this. Everyone leaves you alone, right? The responsibilities are less when a position has been upgraded. The perks are amazing and you get to coast living struggle free. However, you quickly learn, regardless of what that looks like, that the struggle is real. Queen Esther finds herself living as a Jewish queen in a Persian ruled empire. If you remember, she's a Jewish exile living in Persia, and now she is the queen to Xerxes. And no one knows her nationality, no one knows her background, with the exception of her uncle Mordecai, who raised her. Here's the struggle. Her uncle, who has a position in the kingdom, found it to be a great idea to have Esther running for queenship. He overhears some men that are talking outside of the court, and it was his duty to keep the gate of the king. And he heard about this assassination plot. And he goes to the queen, his niece, and he begins to discuss this with her. She's been promoted to this new role, this new position. And the queen goes to the king and he tells him about the plot, what these men plan to do, and these men are taken care of. It doesn't go as far as it could have. Just an easy position, right? Not hard decisions to make, just standard run of the mill days. No, not when you've been promoted into position. It wasn't this plush moment. It didn't have all this amazing flexibility. And I'm surprised sometimes by how you and I view promotion or view this position or positions. I'm surprised at the perspective when someone has been given great responsibility, how easy it is for us to look at them and think that the decisions are always easy and always safe. Who in this room in the last 14 days has had to make a really hard decision somewhere in your position? Anybody else or anybody on this side sitting in the room? Just difficult decision. I think sometimes we desire the blessing of position without a willingness or even a clue of what it takes to carry the burden of the position. The struggle is real. I'll give a few things. With great position comes decisions that are not always easy to make. With great position comes days that are long. There's some of you in this room that wish you worked from 9 to 5, right? Not all positions allow for that. Positionally, sometimes while people are sleeping, your sleep is interrupted with the burdens that you carry. Sometimes we want to advance into position, but we have no clue what the position looks like or what it would take for us to carry the load. I want to remind you today that the struggle is real. And I want to remind each and every person, no matter what position that you're in, that the Lord has given us some amazing spiritual artillery, such as Matthew 11, verses 28 through 30. Then Jesus said, "Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you" what, Vital Church? Come on, say it again. I'll give you what? How many of you need some of that? "Take my yoke upon you. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy to bear, and the burden I give you is light." I don't know what position that you're in. I don't know what you're walking through right now that possibly has put you into a new spot, a new position in your life, but what a wonderful verse we can apply. Esther finds herself in this new appointed spot where she's privy to information that she never knew. And I'm reminded today that Sometimes when we're in positions, we always want to have the answers. Would anybody admit today that you don't have all of the answers, regardless of where you fit in life, but you keep going to the one who does? There's often struggle in position. I want to talk about struggle with proximity. I want to give another list of questions of how our minds sometimes think. We think in terms of somebody with position, and we think in terms of somebody with proximity, and we could think these thoughts. If only I knew who they knew, I could get so much farther in my career. I could advance so much farther if only I had their proximity. I would be successful too if I could get around people that they knew, if I could get in rooms of people that they're in, if I only had the proximity. What kind of favor am I missing in my life when I look out and I see other people who are sitting before kings, sitting before well-known leaders, and I look at my own life? If I only had that type of proximity, I could make a huge difference. I would like to call it this today. I think it's the myth of proximity. For some reason in our life, we think this way, or tend to think this way at times, that proximity alone leads to great success. But I'm thinking in this character in the Bible named Judas, who was with Jesus for 3 years of successful ministry, yet still fell away. He still walked away from the greatness of his Lord. I think with proximity, you will write this down in your notes today because I think this would be helpful. With proximity comes great responsibility. Some of us struggle sometimes how to carry ourselves in certain situations. Some of you have people in your life, there's no way they would invite you into the room of somebody that they know because they know you would mess it up. You don't know how to handle it. You don't know how to handle proximity. That if they would invite you into the room, you would have no clue how to act. I want us to look back to this character, Queen Esther, who has found herself with a new position, and she has found herself in a new place of proximity within this great palace. Esther chapter 3, verse 3, then the palace officials at the king's gate asked Mordecai, "Why are you disobeying the king's command?" They spoke to him day after day, but still he refused to comply with the order. So they spoke to Haman about this to see if he would tolerate Mordecai's conduct, since Mordecai had told them he was a Jew. When Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or show him respect, he was filled with rage. He had learned of Mordecai's nationality, so he decided it was not enough to only lay hands on Mordecai. Instead, he looked for a way to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire empire of Xerxes. Haman sees Mordecai's issue as a sign of disrespect, and really in protocol it was. And he finds out about his nationality and he begins to work the plan. Haman was thinking of a way greater conquest, which was to annihilate the Jews. He goes to the king with this. There are certain people of a certain race that are scattered throughout the region, throughout the land, throughout provinces, and they are not bowing to the king. He said they live separate lives. They live under different rules. They have their own laws. They refuse to do what we're asking them to do. And Haman walks in. Now watch this. He walks in high position, and he walks in with high proximity, and he uses deceit and manipulation to manipulate the king. You can't tell me that just because you have position and proximity, you're always going to do the right thing, because Haman struggled. He does not even tell the king the correct story or the total story. It was Mordecai who was not bowing. There wasn't this great group of people. It was Mordecai that he had an issue with. But he told the king that if you will move forward with this decree, that he would assure 10,000 talents of silver would be deposited into the king's treasury. How many of you would like to have 10,000? Who would like to just have $10,000 deposited in your account today? That'd be pretty nice, at least for me. So he uses this situation. He had proximity with the king, but he had no clue how to act in the king's presence. He lays out a plan. He leverages his own opinion of the matter. He gets the king's ring, takes the king's ring, signs the decree. And Haman really feels, or I believe he feels from the story, that he won this battle of moving forward with his plan, with his half-truth. But Mordecai catches wind of what happened. Mordecai is this Jewish individual, and the Bible says, this would have been protocol for this day, that he tore his clothes, he put on burlap and ashes, and he went out into the open city with bitter wailing. That just means everybody could hear this. He went out and he began to take on what was getting ready to happen, because there was an annihilation plan to destroy the Jews that would roll out in approximately 1 year. But I think about this evil individual that had position and proximity, who had the ear of the king. I'm thinking about another ear that was caught in this story. It was a different ear. It was the ear of a lady that heard about the distress of this broken Jewish man, and word reaches Esther. We find it in the story. She sent new clothes to him because his were rent, his were torn. He refused the offer. There was now great mourning and weeping and wailing that took place by the people that are now clothed in the burlap and ashes. Think about this for a moment. If only I had great proximity. If only I was like so-and-so, I would have success and I would make a difference. Who has learned that your definition and the definition of others on what success is different? Who has also learned that your view of success is quite often differently than God's view of success? And we're really walking through a picture of this. In her new position with proximity, Esther is getting ready to bear or feel the immense weight of the responsibility of proximity, being near to the king. I think many of us desire promotion, but we often don't understand protocol. We desire promotion, but we struggle with protocol. And you've learned this, and I've learned this. There's just some protocol in this room that happens over here that doesn't happen in this room over here. Who's ever worked for company A, and over here you're doing meetings this way, that way, this way, that way. Then you go work for company B, and you go in and try to do a meeting that way, and that won't work because we don't do meetings that way here. It's a complete culture shift, and Esther is living in a complete culture shift for her. Hathach is going to go to Mordecai, and he's going to find out the details of what's happening. And he tells him to go to Esther and to tell her of this decree that has been made, this plan that has been devised. But Esther understood protocol. She knew she could not just run into the room. There was a protocol, there was a standard, there was something that had to happen. Let's go to Esther 4, verse 10. Then Esther told Hathach to go back and relay this message to Mordecai. All the king's officials and even the people in the provinces know that anyone who appears before the king in his inner court without being invited is doomed to die unless the king holds out his golden scepter, and who in the room is ready to run into the king's inner chamber. No. The king has not called for me to come to him for 30 days. This is Esther's conversation here. So Hathach gave Esther's message to Mordecai. Esther was letting Mordecai know that she could not just walk in without invitation, without being invited, that it could be a sure death wish on her life, that the king must call her in. And for the last 30 days, she hadn't heard from him. He had not called her in. I want you to know something today. In your position, And with proximity, you must learn to understand protocol. You say, I don't like protocol. It still doesn't mean you don't have to understand it and work with it. The struggle is real. You can't always do, and we've learned this, you can't always do what others suggest. Like you go to somebody, even spiritually, it's like I'm going to go to them, I'm going to talk to them, and they suggest a certain thing, and you're like, there's no way I could ever do that. There's no way I would ever get away with that. And I've learned, and you've learned, that there are times that we just have to quiet our thoughts enough to get away and make a clear decision. Proximity in relationship requires that. Sometimes I just have to pull back a little bit, and you have an idea, and you have an idea, and you have an idea, and you have an idea. But I've got to get an understanding of this. And it's not that Mordecai did not have an understanding of this, but how many of you understand Mordecai was going through it? But it was not Mordecai that was going to be breaking protocol. Esther chapter 4, verses 13 and 14 is a reply. Mordecai sent this reply to Esther. Don't think for a moment that because you're in the palace, you will escape. When all the other Jews are killed, if you keep quiet at a time like this, deliverance and relief for the Jews will arise from some other place. But you and your relatives will die. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen, and most of us in the room understand this statement. Can you read it with me? For such a time as this. Mordecai, who knows? Perhaps this is the reason that you have the position, and perhaps this is the reason that you have the proximity. He's saying, Esther, if you keep quiet, you are going to die among and with your people. You have been made queen. Perhaps this is the reason that God has brought you to this space for such a time as this. I don't think he was minimizing the importance of protocol. He was reminding her of her position. He was reminding her of the proximity that she had and how it was and what it was that brought her to this place. Proximity gives opportunity where there must be focus and strategy. I've got to stop and I've got to focus and I got to think and I got to get counsel. It's important. So Esther has a reply, and Esther's reply is in Esther 4:15 through 17. Then Esther sent this reply to Mordecai: Go and gather together all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. How many of you know that's pretty good to have some friends that'll fast for you if your life's on the line? Some of you got to know if your life's on the line who you can call and they will fast for you and who won't. We're good at that in the church. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going through. I'm praying for you, brother. Are you really praying for me? Or are you just giving me a statement for a moment? No, I got some people that I will say, Pastor, I'm praying for you, and that will be followed up with a text on Tuesday saying, hey, just to let you know, I'm praying for you. Who needs those types of friends in your life? He says, or she says, go and gather all the Jews of Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days. Who wants to be in that kind of position? Right? The perks of position. Well, I guess for the next 3 days, no one's eating or drinking. All the Jews of Susa, they're to fast. Do not eat or drink for these 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will do the same. And then, though it is against the law, it's breaking protocol, I will go in to see the king, and if I die, I must die. So Mordecai went away and did everything as Esther had ordered him. Position and proximity is not always as easy and as fun as it looks like on the outside. Whoever got that position that brought you into a greater level of proximity with people, and you understand the way that you walked into the room is the way that you were because you didn't learn anything new. The only thing that you had was position that brought you in front of greatness. And Esther, in her position and with her proximity, she is hoping to influence change. Here was the problem with Queen Esther's strategy. It was a very risky strategy. And we find it in Esther chapter 5, beginning at verse 1. On the third day of the fast, Esther put on her royal robes and entered the inner court of the palace. Just across from the king's hall, the king was sitting on his royal throne facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing there in the inner court, he welcomed her and held out the gold scepter to her. So Esther approached. She touched the end of the scepter. Then the king asked her, "What do you want, Queen Esther? What is your request? I will give it to you, even if it is half the kingdom." And Esther replied, "If it please the king, let the king and Haman come today to a banquet I have prepared for the king." The king returned to his attendants and said, "Tell Haman to come quickly to a banquet, and as Esther has requested." So the king and Haman went to Esther's banquet. And when they were drinking wine, the king said to Esther, "Now tell me what you really want. What is your request? I will give it to you, even if it is half the kingdom." Esther replied. Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. First of all, she's walked into the inner court, which she was not allowed to do without the king asking. The king has raised the scepter, and I want you to think through all the change Esther is taking the king through. Hey, I got a banquet prepared for you right now. What's your request? I'll give you up to half the kingdom. Esther replied, "This is my request and my deepest wish. If I have found favor with the king," this is all protocol, "and if it pleases the king to grant my request and do what I ask, please come with Haman tomorrow to the banquet that I will prepare for you." So we're going to have the banquet today, or we're going to have the banquet tomorrow. There's a little shift that takes place. Then I will explain what it's all about. So in her position, with proximity, she's already walked in and she's not dead. She extends it another day and she says, "King, we'll talk tomorrow and I'll tell you my request." I think this is a moment where sometimes position and proximity may bring us to a space of just buying time. Who's ever needed just another hour before the meeting? Who's ever been granted favor with your superior and you're like, "Man, can we push this thing off to tomorrow?" And they raised the scepter and blessed you and didn't fire you, right? You're thankful that they didn't call you in the then and now, but sometimes proximity and the advance of another day allows us to gather our thoughts, and I believe it did in the life of this individual. I've learned this: sometimes hasty decisions will lead to unfortunate outcomes. And I know in my life, sometimes I need to just break away and pray, gather my thoughts before I make any decision at all. When the struggle is real, sometimes we have to just brace for tomorrow. And Haman, this individual that gets invited to tomorrow's banquet, tomorrow's party, leaves this meeting a very happy man. And he sees Mordecai doing his job out by the gate, and he's agitated because he doesn't see Mordecai as nervous or afraid. And he wanted him to be nervous and afraid. So Haman kind of pushes it off. He goes home and he begins to brag to his family and his friends about the platitudes that the king had given him and the great position. He's now over the nobles and officials. He goes on to say, "Queen Esther has invited me and the king to this banquet the next day." But this is what bothered Haman. Haman said, "But this is all worth nothing as long as I see Mordecai the Jew just sitting there at the palace gate." This high capacity leader with position and with proximity wanted another man not to be happy, and he wanted to snuff his life out. And this is what Haman's wife and friends encouraged him to do, which I would not encourage any of you to do, but this is rated R right here. This is in the Bible. So I'll tell you what you should do, Haman. Get a 75-foot sharpened pole and tell the king to impale Mordecai. How many of you know that's dramatic and traumatic? The struggle is real when you have a positional person that has proximity, but they don't handle this in a healthy way. here Mordecai and Esther are trying to defend, they're trying to encourage, while this other man is trying to destroy. And this is one of the things that I've learned that's not always easy. Sometimes we just have to keep moving in the struggle. Sometimes we want to sit, we want to coast, we don't want to fight, we don't want to defend, we don't want to keep moving. Sometimes we just have to continue to move through the struggle, because who would testify in the room? Sometimes the struggle is real. I don't know what you're facing, I don't know what you're going through, but this I know from the story. The next day will come, but not yet, because something happened in the nighttime. And this is what happened. The king, the highest ranking official in the kingdom, could not sleep that night. So he called for the book of history to be brought to him and read to him. And as they begin to read through the book of history, it fell on the story about this man named Mordecai who had stepped up and stopped this assassination plan on the life of King Xerxes. This is the uncle of Queen Esther. He had interrupted the plot to kill the king. And when the book of history was brought, because he could not sleep during the night, and they began to read it, the king asked, "Can you tell me what reward or what recognition did we ever give to Mordecai for this?" And in the book of history, there was no documentation. There was nothing that was shown that he was ever rewarded. And we see this reality all throughout the life of all of these leaders here, that when we just take our time and we trust the Lord, how many of you know he's going to come through for us? And Haman arrives with this message to Mordecai. He's already been through his night, sleepless night, read through the book of history. Haman arrives in the inner court where Esther would have been a few days before, and he is beginning to roll out the plan to tell him what should happen with this 75-foot pole that he has sharpened. How many of you know sometimes we just don't get to get our story out? And the king asks him, he beats him to the floor on the question, and he said, "What should I do to honor a man who truly pleases me?" And what do you think Haman did? Haman turned inward. Haman went meistic. Haman's like, he's talking about me. He's talking about me. Who else in the kingdom could be the one pleasing? And the king asked the question, "What should I do?" And Haman's pretty good at devising plans. We know that. Haman, thinking surely it was the king he was speaking of, responded this way in Esther chapter 6. So he replied, "If the king wishes to honor someone, he should bring out one of the king's own royal robes, as well as a horse that the king himself has ridden, one with an royal emblem on its head. Let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials, and let him see the man whom the king wishes to honor is dressed in the king's robes and led through the city square on the king's horse. Have the officials shout as they go, 'This is what the king does for someone he wishes to honor.'" "Excellent," the king said to Haman. "Quick, take the robes and my horse, and do just what you have said for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the gate of the palace. Leave out nothing you have suggested." Execute the plan, Haman. Make it happen. It's a great idea. Haman, how many of you know that's a bad day for Haman? And Haman's evil plot was crushed, and Haman was not able to carry his plot forward. And Mordecai was fully honored by the king with the words of what came out of Haman's mouth. I want to speak something into your life today. What should have destroyed you will bless you if you will hang on in the struggle. If you don't give up when the struggle is real, if you don't listen to everyone else. I talked about it last week. The Bible talks about it. Life will be hard sometimes. And sometimes we need to be diligent. And not every struggle is there to hurt us. Some of the struggle is to help us move forward. Haman's plot leads to nothing. Now it's banquet time again. I'm telling you, this is the book of banquets right here. It's banquet time again. Remember, Esther wanted to have a banquet for Haman and the king. If we go to Esther chapter 7, verse 1, so the king and Haman went to Esther's banquet. On this second occasion, while they were drinking wine, the queen said to Esther, "Tell me what you want, Queen Esther. What is your request? I will give it to you, even if it's half the kingdom." Queen Esther replied, "If I have found favor," this is again protocol, "if I have found favor with the king, and if it pleases the king to grant my request, I ask that my life and the life of my people be spared. For my people and I have been sold to these who would kill, slaughter, and annihilate us. If we have merely been sold as slaves, I would remain quiet, for that would be too trivial a matter to warrant disturbing the king." "Who would do such a thing?" King Xerxes demanded. "Who would be so presumptuous as to touch you?" Esther replied, "The wicked Haman is our adversary and our enemy." Haman grew pale with fright before the king and the queen. Then the king jumped to his feet in a rage and went out into the palace garden. Haman, however, stayed behind to plead for his life with Queen Esther, for he knew that the king intended to kill him. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the details right now. It's a complicated but a complete story, and Haman did not escape the king's wrath. You remember that 75-foot pole that he sharpened? I'm just going to say it didn't fare well for Haman. There is struggle in position, and there is struggle with promotion. But I want to end with this thought, or with proximity. I want to end with this thought: there's struggle with promotion. And sometimes I found the opposite to be true. When you have these people over here that are saying, "If only I could be in that position, if only I had this type of proximity," the person in the position is sometimes saying, "If only I didn't have to carry the responsibility. If only I could have a moment of normalcy in my life. If only I didn't have to juggle all the meetings and all the things, the needs of people, the desires of people." The position and proximity only lead people to a level of more responsibility. And sometimes when we look at people through the eyes of, "If I've got there, I've arrived," we don't realize the weight and the burden they carry. Esther 8, 1 and 2, and that same day, King Xerxes gave the property of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, to Queen Esther. Then Mordecai was brought before the king, for Esther had told the king how they were related. The king took off his signet ring, which he had taken back from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed Mordecai to be in charge of Haman's property. Struggle in position, struggle with proximity, struggle with promotion. I want to say this today: if you will work through it, and the struggle is real, I'm not minimizing your struggle, and I don't even know what it is, but maybe you will be able to promote somebody else on the other side of it. Don't be a Haman. Don't be meistic. Don't think on how your struggle is going to plow yourself through so you get all the stuff on the other side. When you're going through the struggle, don't isolate yourself. Don't refuse counsel. Don't not open your heart to those around you. Don't see it only through your eyes. Think about those that you will be able to bless on the other side of the turmoil, on the other side of the struggle, if you hang on. I want to say this today. I am proud of some people at Vital Church, and I will not call you out by name today. But I know, and Joy and I have walked through some of your struggles, and you've hung on, and you have not let go. Rebecca, when you were up here talking about prodigal, some of you have held on. You've not let go. There are people that you want to see come into the kingdom of God. I want to tell you right now that on the other side of your struggle, there could be a promotion of eternal life for somebody else because you didn't give up and you hung on and you trusted God. The struggle is not only about me. Though it's real, it's not about me. I'm not just walking through it for me. I'm walking through it because on the other side, something's going to happen. And with the position of Esther, great responsibility followed. And with proximity that Esther had, protocol had to be learned, understood, and it was even overstepped, and her life was spared as she had an emergent situation that she trusted the king with. Esther decided that she would rather risk it all than to live with some comfort in the palace when her people had a great weight in front of them. And here's what I love about it. The king raised his scepter. Her position, her proximity, and desire to save her people promoted the man who raised her. She was already queen. I want to give some people something today. Look at your life. Think of where you should be and where you are. How many of you believe God could use you to promote somebody else? I believe today that your prayers can promote somebody else. I believe sometimes that your resource can promote somebody else and help somebody else, but we got to hang on in the struggle. And I'm learning this in my own life as well. Great risk is sometimes followed by great reward. And though the struggle is real and your endurance is not just blessing you, on the other side of the struggle, there will be blessings that you cannot define today. Who's thankful that though the struggle is real, Jesus is right there in the middle of it with us? And I want to pray some strength and help to some people today. Would you bow your heads with me just for a moment? We're only going to be in the room for a couple more minutes. You would just simply say this, Pastor Brian, you've been speaking the second week. Maybe I missed the first week, but man, I've been going through a struggle. I can't remember everything that you said about Esther and put all those people on a timeline, but this I do know. I'm in a struggle right now that is not there to stop me. It is there to shape some things in my life, and I don't understand it, and sometimes I want to refuse going through it. But there is a blessing on the other side that I feel that God has promised me if I just tarry, if I just hang on, if I just trust, if I just press into Him. If that's you, would you just raise your hand and say, Pastor Brian, would you pray for me? Would you include me in that prayer today? Anyone? Yep. Both sections. We've just got hands going up. Man, I'm going through something. There's a blessing on the other side. Father, I come to you among a people that I am thankful to worship with and do life with and call family and friends. And I am thanking you for the struggle. God, we don't always like it. We don't always want to endure it, but we do know, as we learned last week, that when we are facing trials of many kinds, that it's developing things in us, patience and movement and blessing. And I believe various levels of promotion. So you saw every person that lifted their hand today. And you also saw maybe those that wanted to or needed to and didn't. Would you bless them in the middle of their struggle? Would you give them the endurance that they need today? Would you help them to do the thing that they need to do? Would you help them to press in where they need to press in? Would you help them not to isolate and try to figure it out on their own? Would you help them walk through a good, healthy struggle? And would you grant them wisdom, and would you grant them strength, and would you grant them favor? Lord, I pray for everybody in this room because we're all in different positions doing certain things. For some of us, it's a new position at work. For others, God, it's a new position within our family. We're a matriarch or a patriarch of the thing now. We're carrying a responsibility that we didn't have to. would you allow us just to slow down and say, Lord, there are answers, and I'm bringing my burden to you. And though the struggle is real, I know that you are dead center in it with me. God, we thank you for these moments that we've been able to worship together. I pray that as we're leaving today and driving off this parking lot, standing and having some fellowship before we leave, I pray that we would be an encouragement and a strength to one another as the body of Christ. In Jesus' name, and Vital Church shouted this morning, amen. God bless you today.